Hey,
Hey Michael,
Michael.
can you hear me?
I can. How are you?
All right, man. I love that doggy.
Oh yeah, that's my man's best friend, little Rocco there. He he has to sit on my lap while I do this, or else he would not he would just whine and cry the whole time. So, but I mean he's a good boy. He's not like a typical Chihuahua. He's like the coolest dog ever.
I have a
If I
typical Chihuahua. He's mean, cruel. His breath smells like sulfur, and he growls at me, but he loves me, and it's everything, and it's all the good things
uh
and the bad things together.
It's so funny you should mention the sulfur breath because when I got him as a puppy, like his breath reeked of sulfur and he grew out of it. And I was so glad because I was like, ew.
Mine got worse.
But
He's like a condensed demon.
uh-huh. Oh yeah. So of course, fire and brimstone, sulfur coming out of his pores.
Yeah.
uh you go by Michael. It's funny because I have been a fan of yours for so long that it initially it was hard for me to call you Michael Avon Emming, and it's Emming, not Oming, correct?
No, it is Oeming.
Oh, it's Oming. Okay. I felt like I read once that it was pronounced Emming, but that's the one of the problems in doing these interviews and stuff is that, or when I do reviews, it's like I've seen these names for years and years, but some of them I've never heard them said out loud. It's so strange. I
Sure.
mean, of course, it's way different now with social media and all this stuff. So, but anyway, I am so happy to have you here. I am so excited. I am a fan for years and years. Um,
Thank you so
I
much, man. I appreciate it.
but I am most excited about the new projects you are working on. So I figure I'll just do a quick little intro here, and then we can talk about your career and your art process and stuff like that. And then I'm dying to talk about Blue Book and also Monarch, the one that was just recently announced. So
Great.
all right. So, hey guys, how's it going? Michael Troy here. Today we are talking to artist Michael Avon Oeming. You know him from Powers and Murder Inc. and Hammer of the Gods and the amazing new book with uh, from Dark Horse, Blue Book about aliens and other paranormal phenomena, one of my favorite subjects. So, without further ado, please say hello, Michael Avon Oeming. It is so nice to have you here.
Hey, everybody. Thanks
So, I
for
have
having
to.
me on, man. I really
Uh,
appreciate it.
oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. In preparation, I watched a couple of interviews with you because I try to do that sometimes to not be too repetitive or I imagine, well, I don't know how often you do this, but especially people who've been around for a long time, I'm sure you get a lot of the same questions. I'm sure I'll ask some of them, but hopefully not bore the crap out of you too much.
Absolutely
But
not. You'll be fine. You're gonna do great.
I, so I feel like my first discovery of your work was on Judge Dredd for DC, which your style was very different then. Like I said, I think you might have even been going by Mike Avon Oeming then. And did because you at first went by Mike Oeming and didn't even have the Avon in it, and that was
Correct.
added, correct?
Yeah, so
Um,
that is my legal middle name. Growing up in the 70s, it was a name I avoided because it was always, the teasing of the Avon lady calling, the ding dong thing, right? And I can take a joke. It's just it was the same joke.
right. Yeah, exactly.
And then as
Yeah.
I got older, a friend of mine, Adam Hughes, I knew Adam. He grew up one town over from me. So we met at like I was like 13, 14. He was like 17, 18, something like that. So he was like sort of my Obi-Wan of nerdom. Like he showed me stuff like fucking Blade Runner and some other stuff, right? And he showed me this show called Blake Seven, which was a BBC sci-fi show in the 70s, very much along the ilk of like Doctor Who and stuff. And there was this really cool, badass character named Avon Kerr. And I was like, okay, that's what I should, and I should stop signing my name like I'm signing a check. And now I've got like an identity, and it was easy to remember than Oming. So yeah, so that's where Avon came from.
Yeah, it's so funny because my mom, had an Avon lady when I was growing up, and it was such a thing of our time. But I feel like new generations discovering your work, Avon isn't really a problem anymore as far as that sort of connection, I would guess. And it's a badass name. I didn't mind the Avon connection because I low-key loved looking through my mom's little Avon catalogs
Yeah,
when she would get them.
yeah, and yeah, like as it was always just, it was just the same joke. You know, if there were several jokes that went with it, that would be fine. But it was just one, so you can hear the
Right.
words before they even started. So yeah. And these days, things are just, I don't know, they're just different. And like I don't. It's interesting. Like I've known people who've had several different names growing up, and like even the Mike and Michael thing for me. Sometimes I try to respect my mother's wishes, which she always said, I named you Michael, not Mike. So I'll try to go with that. But honestly, even that doesn't matter to me, yeah, it's names are interesting. They're weird. They're very, like, I also found out that I'm not actually an Oeming by blood.
Oh, really?
It's a whole other thing and stuff, but it is my name. So I don't know. That stuff is it's interesting and weird, and how it means different things to different people.
Well, it's so funny because I talk about parallel lives. I mean, the name Michael comes with a certain amount of baggage, only just because like it was so common when we were growing up that we always had like 3 or 4 Michaels in our classes. I'm sure I was always, well, that would be my real last initial, so I won't say it. But growing up, I was always Michael, whatever initial, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to school, my mom told me, she said, your name is Michael. Do not let people call you Mike. I do not like the name Mike. I named you Michael. But
Wow.
it's so funny though, because the other thing about and imagine a little gay boy in kindergarten putting his hands on his hips and telling people, my name is not Mike, it's Michael. My mom told me to tell you all that. So I don't think she did me any favors there, but very few people call me Mike throughout my life. So I think she, her plan worked.
I wonder if that was a generational thing, like for our parents, if, like I noticed that like my elders had respect for different things than I did. And I mean, I don't mean like big things like whatever, but like, really little things like a suit and a tie meant something different to them than it did to me. And I wonder if like the Michael thing also was something generational that we kind of lost and don't understand why it meant something more to them than it does to us.
The only thing I can put my finger on is that it's a Hebrew name, and which means godlike or next to God. And the A-E-L at the end of it is what makes it Hebrew. So if you shorten it and take that off, it arguably changes the meaning of the name. I don't know.
There's some of the religious aspects that's like then subtext or taken out then, and I can see that. Yeah.
And then there's Michael the Archangel, but I was named after Michael Corleone in The Godfather. My mom had a huge crush on Al Pacino, and she said if I was a boy, she was going to name me Michael. So it's funny because you may have had this throughout your life too. Like Michael is so special. This is why moms say I named you Michael and not Mike, because I feel like moms really like that name. And whenever I meet a mother who has a son named Michael, they always tell me, oh, I have a Michael too. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, so I don't know. I feel like that's it. That's all I know.
Yeah. But that is interesting. Yeah, we're off to a really good start. This is like, I love discovering things I've not thought about before.
Right.
Like things that have always been there, but you've never really peeled back the onion a little bit. And I'm sure it's fascinating to other Michaels, but yeah.
I know we've lost half the non-Michael audience at this point, but so switching gears a little bit, like I said, my first discovery of your work was Judge DREDD. So I'm obviously your first gig is not, doing Judge DREDD for DC Comics, right? So how much body of work did you have before that? What kind of things were you doing?
Judge DREDD was my first big job for sure. Up till then, I had done just a lot of small stuff. I actually started out really young in the industry. I think my first job I was like 14, and it was an inking job. Now that had happened because I was sending out samples to editors, and I'd send out to editors. I'd mail out Xerox copies, looking to get feedback and stuff. And eventually, there was this small company called Innovation out of West Virginia, and they wanted to hire me. They didn't know I was 14, and I didn't know to say that I was 14. I didn't even have real contact information other than my address. So I got like this letter. This is the old days, right? And that led to that. And I was just very, very focused on comics and comics art. I was very lucky that I found this thing I was passionate about at a really young age. So from 13 on, I'd say, and I discovered comics shortly before that, but it was really from 13 on. I was just locked in like a missile. Like this was it. It was just going to be comics. There was no plan B. There was nothing else. So by age 16, I was inking regularly, and I think making a living, or I was regularly employed anyway, inking comics. And I started out with just small books. There was this company Innovation, and they had rights to like Chucky, the little child killer doll, and I started inking that on a regular basis. Actually worked with Derek Robertson on one of his first gigs. Was the two of us working together, and we have really interesting similar lives. Like I feel like we should have been best friends, and some other.
I'm like, how cool is that? That is so cool.
Yeah. And then these led to smaller gigs. I did everything in the independent world. There was a lot of like porn parody comics and like horror parody stuff, and like just whatever you could do to get published. And that just slowly led up to inking work at Marvel and DC, and eventually that led to Judge DREDD, like them seeing all these weird independent stuff that I was doing that was not ready for TV. And there was the editor, Andrew Helfer, who just saw my raw talent. I think he knew I wasn't quite ready for the book. It was him and Paul Kupperberg, but they knew that I was just that young person who was, I was getting ready for those next steps. I ran into it, and I think I wasn't quite ready for the job. And it was one of the best things ever. Was this sort of a failure. I wouldn't call it a failure, but it didn't quite work out. It lasted like 5 issues. There was a maturity level that I didn't have yet, this ability to focus, which for somebody who would just completely focus on comics, you'd think I would have been able to come through this. But I was like 20, 21, something like that, penciling and inking Judge DREDD. It was my first gigs, and I learned a lot. And it was more than I could handle at the time, but I didn't know that it was, which is kind of the best way to take things on. Too many people are putting self gates up. Like there's so many gates out there already, and there's so many obstacles to getting to be where you want to be. I'm in the philosophy of throwing yourself into the deep end. And if you don't swim, what's the worst thing that can happen? Worst things happen is I just didn't last that long on the book. But it was a great experience. I learned so much, and that led to other stuff. And to this day, there are people that don't feel the same way that I felt about, like, they don't look at it like, oh, Mike must learn some lessons on that book. People like it and stuff. So I'm happy that it brought people joy, and I still enjoy looking back on those issues, and brings all my life back and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because it holds a special place in my heart. And my brother introduced me to comic books, and he was older than I am, so he his taste matured quicker in comics, I guess. So he was looking more at indies and things. He discovered Judge DREDD, and he showed me Judge DREDD, and I was completely life changed by Brian Boland's art. Like I absolutely loved it, but I kind of felt like it was my brother's, you know what I mean? It was like his comic book, his creator. And then when DC came out with the Judge DREDD by you, I was like, yes, this is mine. So I took ownership of that, and I have such fond memories of it. I think it's so great. It's very interesting, though, a couple of things you said, because it shows how different times are in comic books now. First of all, it was so great that at that point in time, they would hire artists based on potential of, maybe little projects they did, or the strength of their portfolio, and really let them sort of learn and develop. And the best boot camp is a monthly freaking comic book. And I love that it's not a success that you only lasted 5 issues. And nowadays that would be an epic story arc, from a major.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody lasting 5 issues on a monthly comic book. Wow, that's like the regular penciler there. You know what I mean? So that I just found that kind of interesting.
I don't know. I don't know what's happened, and why that's changed so much. Maybe it's the intensive workload now. Like a lot of artists are penciling and inking their own work. I don't know what it is. I don't know why. Because I don't know. But it's weird that like there was yeah, you used to be able to pick up like a run of comics and you'd find, the same artist team, Rick Leonardi and Terry Austin on, on Cloak and Dagger, obviously the John Byrne stuff or whatever. And, you just find these long runs of people who are just dedicated to just doing this one book for a long time. And it's not a criticism. I don't mean it in that way, but it's interesting how things have changed. And I wonder why that is. Like I got to do Kate Carson at DC for under the Young Animal imprint a couple years ago, and we did that for 2 years, and that felt like a marathon. But I also really, really enjoyed it. It was such a great experience. While it was a company book, it felt the way it felt like when I work on Powers or other creator-owned stuff. So that really helped keep it going. But it is, I was really proud that I did that because previously to that, it's just been miniseries and Powers. There's not been a lot that I'd be able to like just stay on for a long time. And there are things that come out of there, the way you explore the characters and you learn new things about the characters. And I wish there was a little bit more of that. Maybe.
Well,
I don't know. It's hard to tell when you get older. Like you just have to accept change. I don't always know if it's for the better or for the worse, or.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I think that I at first I was feeling a little stodgy and being like, nobody had it better than we did, and comics aren't as good as the. But everyone feels that way about, you know what I mean? It's like just talking to different people. It's like when I interview people, it's like they love the comics that they were introduced to, whether that's 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s. And I'm the same way. I'm like early mid 80s, but luckily I got some of the old 70s thrown in through collecting that too. But that's my passion. That's and you talk about those great big runs, and things that just are different. We won't have that again, but we were so lucky, and that's why comics were, I feel, I don't know, like who's to say if they sold better or not? I don't know, but I just feel like there was something special about like you said, like a couple year run. It's like like Chris Claremont revisiting a story from like 2 years before. That's so cool.
I also, I think it's tough too, because like as we get older, like and I become really cognizant of this, and just it's hard to measure things in the same way. Like as we're talking, I'm realizing that like Nick Klein's been on Thor for like years. I think like yeah, there are books that have the same artist going on. Maybe it's a perception thing. Maybe now because there's so many more comics now than there were back then, and there definitely are. Like I remember there might have been like 40 books a month that would come out from Marvel and DC in the 80s, and now that's like every week, or so it's kind of hard to tell. So like as we're talking, like, oh wait, there are books that still have sustained artists on it. It's just that there's so many books. I think our perception, it's hard. Like I just said, like as I just get older, like perception is harder now. It's just hard to tell.
Perception is harder.
And all this stuff.
And especially, as a professional, you're not as an avid, I just reading and watching interviews with pros over the years, and it makes perfect sense. It's like, if you're actually making comics, you don't really have much time to sit there and read a bunch of monthly comics. Of course, but I also feel like you should know what's out there and you should be aware of it, and you don't want to miss out on great things. I mean, there's a lot of great comic books coming out now. So I think it's a good time for comics. Like, it's so cool that you are still plugging away and just doing amazing things. I mean, you've had an amazing career. Swinging back a little bit. So I feel like I lost a little bit of track of you between like Judge Dredd and all the way up until Powers. So what were you doing in between that time?
Well, there's good reasons for that. So it was an interesting time in the industry. So I went from Judge Dredd, and very shortly after that, I worked on Foot Soldiers with Jim Kruger at Dark Horse. And we did 4 issues of that. And that's the first sort of landmark work for me, like Judge Dredd is, but also because I have mixed feelings about like my performance on it. Like I can still look at parts of Judge Dredd and I'm happy, especially that cover, the very first cover. I still love that cover.
Amazing. But like the cover to number 5 is very cool too, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I think that was, I put an Easter egg of a character from Red Dwarf. It's this British science fiction show. He's on the cover there, but Foot Soldiers was the first thing like in total I can look at and still, even though it's old, I can still be happy with, like, oh, this was me beginning to really come into my own. But right after that, so I did those 4 issues, and that was around 1994, something like that, 95. That's when the industry started to implode from the speculator market of the 90s. And suddenly you went from all these working opportunities, all these different companies, and like all these new people and artists coming in, to stores started closing, and then companies started closing, and then like the elbow room for jobs just became less. So you didn't see much between after Foot Soldiers and after Judge Dredd and Powers, because I ended up, after Foot Soldiers, going back to inking. A lot of it was with my partner, Neil Vokes, and we did like Ninjak together for like a year or two at Valiant. And I was just basically doing a lot of inking for him and inking jobs wherever I could get it. Some very small indie work. I was doing my first creator-owned book called Ship of Fools through Caliber, but those sold like 1,000 copies or something like that. So it was hard times. And during that time period, I actually had to go and get a real job, in quotes, for the first time in my life, because my son was born. And I went from the success of Judge Dredd and Foot Soldiers, where you're going to cons and you're doing everything you're supposed to do. You've climbed the ladder to this position, and you're being paid, and you get to be flown places and to do all this kind of exciting stuff, to not be able to get work, and it was a real kick in the shins. But like you hear a lot of people talk about, sometimes those hard lessons are the best lessons, because there was a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and that 1 step back was really important. When I couldn't get work anymore, I started to think about, well, what I was doing, how I was going to make a living. And then I was like, well, I'm going to get the security guard job, because I would imagine I could sit there and draw, like, unless I'm walking around, prowling, I don't know what it is in my head. But generally I thought, yeah, I could sit there, and I did. I ended up working at like a car auction place, and I was just sitting there and drawing. And I decided I'll just make comics. Maybe I'll get 1 or 2 out every year or whatever. And, I'll just have a regular job. And, I don't need to have this thing that I thought that I wanted out of a career, and it was all the best lessons. And one of those lessons was to stop thinking about, well, what do editors want? Stop guessing about what kind of line style they wanted, or what kind of, there was a lot of trends back then for art styles. And I just stopped guessing in that stuff. And one of the things that I noticed was I was trying some tryout pages to get on the Superman or Batman Adventures books. And ironically, I couldn't really stay on the model sheet, but there was something about stripping down all the line work, because I wanted to be like Art Adams and Michael Golden and Kevin Nolan with all these lines on my pages. But having a son and a job, and realizing I had less time to create comics, by stripping out all of that detail, I started to, I would have a little more time to execute a page, and B, I just started to really find my voice that way. So in basically not being able to get work and having to get a real job and like kind of take a step back from the industry, I was able to rethink things. And it was during that time period I met Brian Bendis and David Mack. And yeah, and then it just started from there, and I started drawing their characters in my style, and we just started talking, and everything changed after that. So it was good to have a really disappointing. It was really hard. It was really hard to have to go and get a regular job and feel like, oh, this isn't going to work out, after I had already had a taste of it,
But like you said, I am a firm believer in everything happens for a reason. And, if you can't be happy about the hard times in your life, at least try to analyze them and realize that they might have happened for a reason. But I think it's very interesting that because your style is very different on Judge Dredd from what it has evolved to, and so it's interesting to know that you found this, like you were kind of auditioning, I guess, for the adventure, like trying to do an animated style and couldn't really stick to it, and then found your own voice. So that's super cool. It's also interesting they bring up, and this speaks to, people doing monthly comic books. I watched an interview with John Romita Jr., another iconic comics legend, of course. And he said that he came to his style, he couldn't draw exactly like his father, and he came to his style because he had to find something that would be comfortable enough for him to be able to execute on a monthly basis because he needed a job and he needed to pay bills. And
Yeah.
so many people, like in the past, it's like, Jack Kirby, he was just a workhorse. He was an amazing genius, of course, but he also had, a mortgage in mind or whatever, as part of his work ethic. And plus, nobody had the distraction of YouTube and Facebook and
Yeah.
Instagram. I mean, could you
Yeah.
imagine being able to draw for 8 hours straight without having to check your email or
The distractions, right?
yeah.
Yeah. There's this great channel on YouTube called the Kirby Continuum, and what it is like they put together a month of Jack Kirby, so it just shows you what he did that month, and sometimes it's 3 books that he would have drawn in 1 month. That's incredible. And like, these aren't books with missing backgrounds. Everything is full, and it's full of his imagination. And he didn't have tools like we have now. I have a Google SketchUp to help me with cars because I'm still not good at drawing cars. We have tools in our digital backpack to set up perspective points for us instead of like lining it all up on the table and stuff. There's so much that's kind of done for us to make the job easier. And these cats had a ruler, a number 2 pencil, a brush, and a quill, and maybe a bookshelf with some. Well, of course they had reference, right? But it was just some books and stuff. They didn't have the internet at their hands. They didn't have like, oh, I got to learn about how this thing works. I'm going to watch a YouTube video or to Google how this machinery kind of works or anything like that. It's just pure imagination, and blows me away every time. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. As soon as you talk about like Kirby and like that ability to just create stuff.
I was just we were just talking about the evolution of your style, and
Oh,
it's funny because I don't know, like your old style was popular, but maybe that is what helped make you take off. I don't know. Was Powers, like, by the way, I have a letter in the issue number 4 in the letters column of Powers, and I don't even remember. Cool. I don't remember what it said, and I wasn't even a big letter writer at the time, so I don't know why I felt compelled to write it. I'm gonna have to like dig it up and see what the hell I said. But was Powers instantly a hit? I feel like it kind of was.
It was one of those rare things. So like Brian and I had never had a book that really sold well, and certainly not enough to do color. But when we decided to do Powers, he was getting a little more traction on his creator-owned stuff, like just praise-wise, not sales-wise, but praise-wise. And he had just cracked some Marvel jobs. And I'm not even sure I think Ultimate Spider-Man was around the same time. It hadn't come out yet. I don't really remember like all this stuff. It starts to get blurry in my head. But long story short, first issue came out and it did moderately well. We were prepared to go to black and white by like issue 3 or something. But by issue 2 or 3, numbers started to go up, and they kept going up for a long time. In fact, there was for a while the run was selling around 30,000 copies, which is huge, even by today's standards of like a mainstream comic. A lot of it had to do with smart people at Image who knew distribution and understood how to entice retailers without setting them up for failure with gimmicks and stuff. It had something to do with, like, I remember they were sending out like free issues of number 1 when they ordered 2, something like that. I don't quite remember what it was, but it was really smart. And then Brian's writing and the contrast of my cartoony to what was being done there, it just caught on. Some of it has to do with our talent. A lot of it has to do with timing. There are plenty of times a great book comes out and it's not the right time for it to catch on the way that it should. And we were lucky that we had kind of everything happening at the same time. But yeah, it was like right away, it was a hit. Like I was able to quit that job. I think by issue 3 or 4 of Powers, I was able to quit that the security job. So those first couple of issues, half of it was drawn in a security booth, like ironically, like a little Superman kind of style booth with a little table in there, and I was just drawing away Powers. And one day I was able to go, oh, I can leave this job and just full-time do comics again.
Oh, pshaw. So you paid your dues for 3 months. I thought you had,
Oh
I
no, I was
mean,
there for like a year, year and a
oh,
half,
okay.
something like that. Yeah.
I was like, oh wow. I was like, that's the quickest turnaround I've ever seen in my life.
Oh no,
Like,
no, it was quite a bit, quite a while. Yeah.
yeah. Oh well, okay. Well, uh,
But good times too, because even at that parking lot, I learned I had started working on Mice Templar. I created there, and before I brought in my other partners who were equal creative partners on it as well. It's just that those germs go back to there. There's a project I'm still wanting to do that I developed from that time period. Um, Hopefully I'll get to do it, but like it was a great time. Like once I got over the depression and disappointment of like my career not working out.
yeah.
And I was able to just focus really on just being an artist. And that was the best lesson of that. Like, I don't care. And I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to anybody who does care about other stuff, but I don't care about industry accolades or am I at the coolest convention? Are people seeing pictures of me with this person or doing that thing or whatever? And that's cool. And I went through a period of that and stuff, but having almost lost everything, it made me just focus on the work. Even to this day, like if I'm on social media, I'm only talking about the work or other things that I like or some vaguely innocuous joke. But and I don't mean this as a criticism to any other way of approaching your work or the career or anything, but like I got the crap scared out of me. Like I said goodbye to my car. My first car that I was able to buy with Judge DREDD money was also towed away because after a while I wasn't making money anymore. I wasn't bringing in my half of the marriage, the money and stuff. I wasn't able to contribute the way that I was like, and I was just losing everything. So once I got that back, I've just been completely focused on the work. Maybe to a fault, but I'm also comfortable with that at this point. Like I just realized I'm a workaholic, and it's all of I can't control these other things in life. The only thing I can control is the page, and so I look back at that time. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, but ultimately it was the best of times.
Yeah.
The struggling times were the best.
Well, you have an amazing body of work, and I actually give you credit for the way you are handling it. Like I feel like sometimes we do become too familiar with creators. It's like I followed your work for years. I watched a couple of interviews, but I don't know you. You know what I mean? It's like I love your work, and that's good enough for me. I don't need to necessarily know what you had for breakfast today. What'd
Thank
you
you.
have
I
for
love
breakfast today? I'm just
that.
kidding.
I'd say I'm boring, man. Like my schedule, everyday schedule is almost the exact same thing. Part of that comes with work. Some of it's like health issues with my wife and stuff. So yeah, so every day it's eggs with spinach and
For inquiring minds want to know. So do you work like 9 to 5 ish, like during the day, or do you work all kinds of crazy hours? Do you have what kind of work schedule do you set for yourself?
It's pretty much just spread out throughout the day and week. So like what I'm about to say sounds crazy, but I can take a lot of breaks and I can take them whenever I need to. But generally I work 7 days a week, as much as I can from after breakfast. So say at like about 11. So we take a long breakfast. That's my big, like we usually have like almost like a 2 hour breakfast, just, for living and working together. Taki and I have a lot that we can talk about, which is awesome. And that's where we do most of our talking is in the morning. Then we get on with the day. And like, I'll just keep working till lunch. We have a long lunch, dinner, and then I go back to work. But I have a desk downstairs. So like Taki will play video games or watch something and I'm next to her at the desk drawing. Or I was working on the couch until my neck caught up with my age. So I had to put a desk down there. So like I'll sometimes I work till 10 o'clock at night. But again, lots of breaks. I'm taking time for myself and stuff. So I just like working. It's just a big part of my life, and I don't think work is a weird word for it even. Yeah, I just love drawing all day and writing as much as possible. Like I get anxiety over the amount of stuff that I want to do. Every time I'm on a new project, I can't wait to kind of get to the next one. And then I just have to forcibly slow myself down. It's not like I'm a genius machine or anything where I have great ideas. It's more the drive to do them, you know. So it's not that I think I have something more special to say or whatever, but it's just I have a drive to just keep making stuff. And that affects my day. Yeah, I can never do a 9 to 5. Like I admire people who have like they have like an office that they go to or studio space, or they have like really hard division lines between their private life and their working life. But for me, it's all the same thing.
I know it's true. Yeah, like when you're an artist, like the desk is always there. The temptation is always there to it's funny because sometimes I feel so inspired in like the worst situations where I just am not home and I just cannot wait to get to the drawing board and then it's gone by the time you get home. And I hate that. So there is something grand about having, your workspace and your where you live. So
yeah, and all these things I'm saying, sometimes I feel I don't know what the word is, but I feel judgmental, or it sounds like I'm saying that something else is wrong, and like everybody's choices and the way that they would have approached work, I think is important to find your own path. So don't listen to me when I'm saying I work 24/7 and all that stuff. Like that's something that's meant for other people. It's just what I'm comfortable with. And when other people want to separate how they work from how they live, like I admire that too. Just find your path and whatever you're most comfortable with. I'm always afraid of just sounding judgy about it, because like just the older I get, the less I'm sure of things. You know what I mean? Like
it's funny you say that, because I find myself in that situation quite often. Like, I feel like, especially when I was younger, I was always so righteous and like so confident and sure in my opinions. And now I'm just so much more open, and I'll always admit when I'm wrong immediately. You know what I mean? I realize that things are just not black and white. Things are 100% different. You just learn so much about people and human nature and situations. You become more forgiving and more understanding, less judgmental. You don't know what people are going through. You don't know what people's motivations are. You don't know 100% what outcomes are going to be. So it's better to step back and just sort of observe a little and try to have a little more clarity in situations. But you do not sound judgmental at all. And it's so funny because it is people like you who worry about stuff like that, even though you are like fine and pleasant. Meanwhile, other people just spew vile and venom recklessly without.
Like even outside of the bile and venom, I think people are meaning well, but they're accidentally putting up barriers for other people about how they should approach their work or what they should or shouldn't do. What's quote cheating or not cheating in art, or what a hobbyist is versus a professional, or any of this stuff. And like so what Brian Bendis, he teaches at Portland State, and Taki has taught a bunch of the classes there as well for a couple of years. And then he has these classes, or these master classes. So we hear a lot of people who have so many self boundaries put up that when I see other creators or even non-creators or whoever just trying to be kind of like art cops, whether it's from this kind of harsh way, we get a lot of this kind of, there's certain groups in comics that are specifically doing that, but then there's even sort of these well-meaning types who are still putting up obstacles accidentally, I think, Like what we constantly want to tell people is you don't need permission to create. You don't need permission to publish your work. You don't have to qualify yourself. You don't have to have excuses for something working or not working. It's just, if you want to be a creator, if you want to be a writer, you just do it. You put your work out there. And there's nobody to stop you, and there's no good habits or bad habits. There's just your habits. So I'm just always concerned about that. Like, I don't want people to have self-doubt about stuff. Because if I did that, to this day, I mean, I know there's lots of stuff I just can't draw. I'm just not good at, and if I let that stop me, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. And it's easy to say, harder to do. But I'm hoping more people can just embrace themselves and go forward and not listen to the other noise around them.
That is good advice for sure. And and I would like to add to that, do not share works in progress, because that is always the biggest disappointment ever. You will get people coming up with the craziest shit that you never even considered, coming out of left field with weird attacks.
Yep.
And it's just not worth it. You know what I mean? Keep
Yeah.
it to yourself until you're ready to share it with the world.
Like even
And
that well-meaning yet unsolicited advice, like that's a thing that a lot of people don't get too. Like they're trying to be helpful, like, oh, if you added a thicker line here or you did this and stuff, like, but when people are sharing their work, it's not always about that. It's not always about asking for criticism or how to improve something. That they just want to share because you're working in a vacuum and all this kind of stuff. And like, so even that well-meaning, like unless somebody's asking me specifically, what can I do to improve this or something, like it's just encouragement, because yeah, unsolicited advice can be very well meaning, but it could just be pretty harmful sometimes too.
yeah, because I mean, I feel like either you're right. I mean, people either A, don't know that it's coming out pointed, or they're just trying to do that. You know what I mean? They're like the person who will be there to point out the flaw. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
And I can say that because I was like that when I was younger. I thought I had this knowledge to share, and being who I am, you're just able to just express your freaking opinion at all times and stuff, right? And like I had to get older and learn some lessons about these things, and I'm glad we're talking about that kind of stuff more.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, art is like subjective. First of all, it's like I do a lot of reviews, and my art taste ranges all over the place. One of my friends makes fun of me because he says you love everything, and I'm like, well, as an artist, I kind of do love everything. I feel if you're inspired to pick up a piece of pencil or a piece of paper and a pencil and a crayon or a pastel or a stylus or a Apple pencil or whatever, and make your vision of art, like more power to you. Like we
Yeah.
cannot have enough art in this world.
Yep. Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of like, I have to get to it too because I feel like if I don't, it'll be like 8 hours later, and I will have not talked to you about this because I feel like I could talk to you all day. But the Blue Book series from Dark Horse and James Tiny Onion, is that how you pronounce his name?
I
Or
think so.
Tinian?
Yeah.
Is
Tiny onion.
amazing. Is amazing. And like I said, it's funny because I don't avidly collect comics anymore. I feel like I'm getting a little more into it again. But I've seen projects from you here and there, and I'm not a big fan of like sword and sorcery kind of stuff. But like when I saw this Blue Book, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like I love, Blue Book is about aliens and the paranormal, and they're all based on factual accounts, should we say,
Yeah.
or true stories. It I it's funny because this is like so close to my heart, these subjects. I love, like, I love all this and eat it up. And I was very familiar with the Betty and Barney Hill story that opened the first issue of Blue Book. And my heart sank when I realized it was their story because I was like, oh, I'm so familiar with this story. This is boring. What a waste of time. I cannot believe this is even like the subject. I didn't expect it to be like this. And I was immediately drawn in. It was freaking amazing. Like it was riveting. I knew the whole story, and I was like, so much drama, and such a large part of that is the art. And I feel like you've once again uh, like reached an evolution in your art. Like it is like every page is a revelation. You're doing your style, but it's all in like monochromatic blue tones, hence Blue Book. I love that, genius. I mean, what a concept, right? But I'm getting like Alex Toth vibes, and your silhouettes and your use of negative space. And then I'll turn the page, and just like the way you use a different shade of blue to sort of outline something. Like I could look at the art all day. It's just beautiful.
Thank you.
Like you seem completely, truly inspired by this book. I mean,
Thank
it
you.
feels like some of the best stuff you've ever done. So how did this happen? What are your thoughts on it?
Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. And it's one of those special projects, growing up in the 70s, I grew up with lots of reruns of In Search Of was a really big influence on me on so many levels, like that kind of degraded rerun stock footage of just creepy stuff and Leonard Nimoy's voice and whatnot. My mom had a sighting when she was younger with her sister, my aunt. And so that stuff was always a what if question around us. Like we're just always interested in that sort of stuff. So I was always familiar with all these cases. And when James had this opportunity to do kind of whatever he wanted to do at Substack, because if you asked us if this was a book that would sell, we'd say no, not in the direct comics market. You know, if you're going to do an alien invasion book or a fringy book like this, you have to like sort of pump it up to be like crazier and stuff. We had this opportunity, and then I think between James's popularity, and then there is something about the modern folklore of ufology, you know, and it's also morphed so much over the years that I think revisiting these earlier cases is weirdly refreshing, as opposed to, you know, dusting off an old book. Like re-looking at this stuff puts modern goings on in perspective, like especially if you're into this stuff. History is just repeating itself in the UFO world when you have, you know, the US Air Force is, you know, releasing videos and they're saying, you know, we're not sure what these things are and stuff, and then they walk it back and all of this. This all happened before in the 50s. We had hearings, and balloons again was a big part of the theme and stuff, and disinformation and misinformation, and you know, the whole field is sort of, it's just happening all over again. So anyway, when James said Blue Book, like that the image of the book itself came to me immediately, and I think it did to James as well. Like the title speaks to itself, so it almost tells you immediately how you're going to execute it. And the thing that I was really excited about, and the reason why I think it's grabbing people visually, is that there's nobody being punched in the book. There's nobody leaping through glass windows and stuff. Even the alien stuff isn't like this big double page spread of, you know, of a million ships landing on Earth or whatever. It purely leans on emotional connections to the characters, their reactions, their body language, their physical appearances, their emotions that are coming through. So I had to lean on that because I didn't have, you know, big action sequences, and that subtlety just really connected to people, I think. And then sometimes in the layouts, because there was, quote, nothing going on the page, I had to come up with a way to use the layouts to express what was happening and to make the layouts just as interesting as the body language and stuff. So I like limitations in art. I find by having limitations, you focus a lot more. When you can just kind of do anything and go wild, it's almost meaningless to me anyway. So the limitations of color, the limitations of action, all focused everything into like this kind of condensed experience. I think that's why it's working with people.
It's magic. It just really is. It just looks so good. And I was funny. So are you working completely digitally these days?
No, Blue Book, at least the first issue, that definitely the first part of Betty and Barney when they're kind of being stalked by the UFO, that's all traditional.
Okay,
The
because you
second
said
half when
you had mentioned like using help for drawing cars, because I thought the car looked dope in the book.
So the car, so I'll draw it all in pencil, and then the car I will use Google SketchUp and get angles that I want to, and then in Photoshop or Clip Studio, I'll then put the layouts in there, and I'll use some 3D elements like Google SketchUp cars, sometimes like the diner scene, like I can find an inside of a diner. Now the key is when you bring in those elements, because they're cold and they're technical, you really have to make them your own. Like, and I look at them like a circle template or like a ruler to draw a straight line, a circle template to draw a circle. After you draw that circle, to make that a planet, like you have to bring in all your own elements and your own depth and values to it. So all those cars look a little shaky because I still ink them by hand. I didn't follow every detail. I just used it as like a breakdown to be able to throw my style and art on top of. So hopefully it never sticks out like, oh, here's a 3D model in the middle of this analog stuff.
Never. Like I was shocked when you had mentioned that, because it looks all traditional to me.
No, great, thanks. But then in the second issue, when he wakes up, I think that becomes digital. Now that only became digital because sometimes digital is faster than analog. And I say
Right.
sometimes because if it's a really detailed thing, like when I did Midnighter, that was all digital, but because of the nature of that, with all the action scenes and like robots fighting and things exploding, when you have digital work, it's so easy to just keep adding things that even though it's faster because you're not changing pens or dipping brushes or any of that stuff, you could just kind of do a continuous line. You can also just keep going, and you can add in this thing and you can add in that thing. Whereas when you're working analog, I find that I use a lot more negative space. Some of it is because of time, that forces me to use negative space, but forces me in a smart way, not in like, well, I don't have time to draw a background here. Like I think about where I'm going to put the time and energy onto a page. But I've started to develop a secondary discipline when I'm working digital to not do things because it's just so easy to add more.
Yeah.
Again, limitations are important, even if you set them on your own.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean you do have the pared down style, and it's funny because George Perez was a huge influence on me as an artist initially, and then people like Art Adams, and I too wanted to be like super super detailed, and I thought that that was like the best way to go. And but as I've gotten older, I've been drawn to people like you and Alex Top, and just more animated sort of minimal styles. Like there really is just even I remember in art class in high school, sort of being like a little bit embarrassed to admit that I liked comics and whatever. And my art teacher, to her credit, was like, "Oh, comic art is like one of the most difficult art you can imagine because it's so dependent on the lines that you can't hide as much in the detail of like a painting or something like that." So
Yeah.
that always stuck with me, and I was like, like sort of gave you that like little bit of encouragement, you know what I mean? So
And ironically, that's the hard thing about drawing simply, is you can see the mistakes easier. So you have to sometimes be a little more concise than I would if I had a lot of detail. And sometimes it's just hard. It's hard not to draw things. So like I actually spend a lot of time, especially on the digital pages of Blue Book, taking lines out. Some of it's for the effect of when you have like a blue shape behind, and then if I erase like all this line and it becomes this open thing. So there's that, but then there's also just not putting in too many wrinkles on a clothes or too many like shading lines and stuff. And sometimes I'm spending time just taking stuff out. Yeah, it's its own discipline, which is funny because like Art Adams is why I wanted to be an artist. It was X-Men Annual 9 and New Mutants 2, I think it was, where they go to Asgard. And for years, all I was doing was just trying to be Art Adams, and he's the reason why I'm a comic book artist. And even now, there's teeny tiny bits of Art Adams in my work that'll pop up, mostly just in some minor rendering stuff. But yeah, as I got older, I just fell in love with the simplicity of Alex Toth and Mignola, obviously. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I the focus of my show is like reviewing a lot of the comic books from my old collection that I grew up on, and mostly a lot talking about the art and the artists that I love. And it's so common for not a swipe, but like as an artist, it's like everyone was drawing, like I don't even know who started the smoke. Was it the Mike Mignola smoke, or I feel like it could have even been Art Adams, but somebody started that and it caught on and everybody ran with it, just like, or the the crisscross hatching or something
Sure.
like that. You know what I mean? It's like you borrow from other artists. I even saw it taken to like an extreme point where this artist was telling people a good way to find your style is to look at artists that you like, start tracing their work, and start like incorporating different things from different artists that you like and want to put in your style. And I actually saw an interview with Bill Sienkiewicz, and like my initial like mind was like, oh no, that's terrible. Don't steal from everybody else to find your own voice. But in a way, it's how can you not? You know what I mean?
It's totally look, and that's how I started out. Like when I said, I wanted to be Art Adams, I was literally tracing Art Adams as a kid, and like my earliest work was Well, the inking was a lot of the inking was, the joke about tracing and stuff, right? But it helped me understand. Like I recently posted a page of Art Adams that I inked when I was like 14 or something from Long Shot. It's like the last page of the Long Shot miniseries. And I had vellum. I would take vellum and then overlay it, the comic, and then ink.
I'm
And I
immediately
learned a lot
looking
from
that up.
that.
I need to see that. But
Yeah. And it's funny because like, yeah, that smoke thing that you're talking about, ironically, yeah, both Mignola and Art Adams, I think, developed that look that you see a lot of afterwards. And it was from those issues of X-Men Annual 9, because Mignola was an inker on there. There was one of several inkers. It was him and Al Milgrom, I think, inking Art Adams. And early Mignola stuff, pre-Hellboy, there was a lot of that kind of like that line going through the smoke and stuff. And then I didn't see too much of that before that, because before that work, like Marvel specifically had a very Marvel house style. It was very sort of, Buscema, John Romita Jr. mixes, and again, it was just artists learning from other artists. And so, yeah, that's one of those gatekeeping things I was talking about before, about like copying a style, telling people you can't do that. Like, you shouldn't trace somebody else's work and publish it.
right.
That's kind of the limitations. But if you need to copy somebody else's stuff, by copy I mean like learn from their style. Look, I still have a heavy Mignola influence in my work. I've been just enamored by his stuff going back to like early 80s. And it's just in my blood. And I got to the point where I just stopped fighting it, and I learned a lot from Mike, but there's still a lot of his stuff that's just a freaking mystery to me. Like, and I think that's why it's so engaging when I look at Mike's stuff. A lot of times I can't figure out what he's doing, why he did it, even when he explains it, and it's just this sort of weird gift that just keeps giving. And of course, there's other artists that I'm very influenced by, like Toth, especially. And Kirby, Kirby's a huge influence on me as well. And sometimes, depending on the project, you just see more of something because the project sort of dictates what it calls on. Like Blue Book is definitely much more of like Alex Toth, Doran Cook, it's Toth.
Yeah, I am unfortunately from the school of the people who I was introduced to art, like George Perez, John Byrne, Art Adams, Paul Smith on the X-Men, all these like really like sort of getting away from the Marvel house style, right? So then
I think we got in the same time, because I had the same reactions. Like the people that I admire were the people who, and again, I'm not being judgmental on it, like the people who weren't doing that Marvel house style. It, as a kid, it all looked the same to me. So anybody who looked a little different, John Romita Jr., Rick Leonardi, Steve Lee Aloha, like Bill Sienkiewicz, like anything that was just outside of the norm attracted me. So I think we were early 80s, it was the same, early mid 80s, same thing.
So I did not like Jack Kirby that much at all. I thought it was blocky and ugly and horrifying. And now I'm horrified that I had that opinion, because obviously,
Same way.
God, such a genius, so beautiful, like,
yeah,
amazing. Obviously, I mean, I cannot say anything that hasn't already been said.
It's a big journey for a lot of us.
Yeah, it really is. I'm just that is kind of a fun thing too, because now I'm discovering artists before like I got into comics, like getting more into them, like with new appreciation, like I don't know, just like some of the, like even some of the artists that I didn't necessarily like, Sal Buscema, like I feel like I just took him for granted, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I never disliked his work, but I was never like over the moon about it. Like I thought it was fine.
Weirdly, I was the same with Buscema, like John Buscema. Like as a kid, it didn't do anything for me. And it wasn't until I got older and I got into the more simplified stuff that it suddenly everything changed one day. I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is why he's a genius, And again, it's just generation. If you grow up looking like a lot of kids now, they're growing up with manga, with Japanese animation and Japanese comics, and they'll see value in that I don't see in the exact same way. And they won't look at like Mignola or Art Adams in the way that I do, just the way that I didn't initially look at Buscema which sounds insane to say now, but
I know it does.
it's just an age thing when you start out, what hits you first, right? And I think as you grow older, then you end up looking back and go, oh shit, like, John Buscema's amazing. And it's like, how,
Yeah.
everything. And I keep his work next to me when I do superhero stuff, and I'm at a loss. Like, how do I be expressive? There's Jack Kirby and John Buscema when I'm doing superhero stuff, and I'll look through there, and like, I won't copy a pose, but I'll copy just the feeling that I get from it. Like if somebody's being like knocked back and like their arms are just flailing, right? Like nobody's better at that than Kirby and Buscema,
Oh yeah, I know. It just, I mean, you talk about, yeah, like perspective and like rulers and stuff like that. I mean, Jack Kirby must have had a 10-foot ruler to be able to draw the stuff that he drew. I mean, I just can't even imagine. It's so crazy. But talk about an education in art. One of even as an artist, and I don't even know how I would have felt. Like I would have lost my mind if they had these when I was like, 12 to 20, like, really trying to develop my style and drawing a lot. The artist editions that are so popular now. When I got the X-Men one with John Byrne and Terry Austin, you would think that the biggest excitement for me would have been the John Byrne art, but I was blown away by the level of skill and precision and technique that Terry Austin put on every single page and every single panel.
I'm so upset that he does not get, I don't know what the word is, respect or whatever you want to use. He doesn't get the accolades. He doesn't like Terry Austin did amazing things that to this day I don't think inkers, like, he's still unique. Like you can still look at a page of his, and I don't know what it is about the line quality. Sometimes I used to think it was so sharp, but when I look at it close, a lot of it were flat lines. Or he was using like a technical pen, right? And there wasn't a lot of like flowiness, but he got so much motion out of it and stuff. And yeah, Terry is just, he's like the Jack Kirby of inkers as far as I'm concerned. And I wish we heard more about him or saw more of his work.
I think one trick is cutting off the tip of your crow quill nib, and that gets you a flatter edge. That because he had that precise. Oh my gosh! Like, yeah, you talk about. Oh, see, this is another thing that excites me about art, and the digital, I feel, has ruined this. Like, we talk about the smoke or whatever. One of the, like, a signature of a comic book artist is how they draw BWS, black with stars, the night sky. And you can, like, when Terry Austin is inking a John Byrne BWS, it is mind-blowing. It looks different from George Perez's BWS. It looks different from Eric Larson's. It looks, you can tell an artist. These are little hallmarks and signatures for me. And, like when I think it was like maybe Martha Washington, where Augie, oh God, who the hell, McGee or somebody did digital coloring and the clouds were painted. And I was like, I want drawn clouds.
Sure. But I know what you mean. Like there's a weird thing in clip. I will use some digital, like digital leaves. There are brushes that are just leaves or they're just grass. I will typically try and marry the two together, but sometimes just depending on the project, I don't. And like, it's a legitimate tool and there's not a problem with it, but there's something about, it just feels like I'm using clip art.
Right.
Which is also fine to use in your art. Like there's no rules to this and stuff, but there is a difference between like Walt Simonson had to draw every effect that he ever did in lines. But now, like I can either do lines or there's just a lot of effects that that just are done for me digitally, and they still look beautiful. So again, it's not saying there's anything wrong with it.
No, I think it's smart to marry both if you can. I have one of my friends is an amazing artist, and he uses everything under the sun, and that's like sort of his, muse and inspiration. He starts on boards, he'll draw on brown paper bags, he'll use crayons, he'll use whatever, you know what I mean? And but then he'll scan it and touch it up digitally, and you cannot argue with the results. So I'm more than happy however anybody wants to create art.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're right. There was like just a style thing of like that incidental, like not a person, not an animal, not the cityscape, but like the effects or Blackwood stars, that kind of like that this sort of side part of art where you're drawing, yeah, I guess like effects and stars and spacescapes and stuff. You know, now a spacescape, you just got like just, you know, digitally bunch of circles, you fill in the black. You can even have a pattern of stars or a brush that does stars for you and stuff. Nothing wrong with any of that, right? But there was something just different and special about like Kirby drew a billion planets. He drew all the planets. You
Yeah.
know, Simonson did all the planets and weird space shit going on and stuff like that. That's all his hand. It's everything is intentional from his brain. And I'm not criticizing one or the other because I do both. Sometimes, you know, but honestly, I've leaned so much on like the ease of digital that sometimes I have to think really hard and I have to look at like Simonson or Kirby or Buscema and think about like, well, how would I do this weird flash coming out of somebody's hands? Because generally I can just draw a shape and then the colorist will then do some amazing painted effect over it that makes things glow. And then there's like voluminous light coming off of it and all this stuff. Whereas, you know, the guys used to just do this just with a quill pen back in the day.
But even someone like Kirby had his, you know, collage phase where he was using photographs from magazines and putting his art over it. So, I mean, you
Yep.
know, if anyone wants to
Perfect proof that
argue,
he would be using Clip Studio and all that stuff today. You know,
oh
he wouldn't have
yeah, I
limited
mean,
himself.
I would hope not. I mean, you know, why not? You know, it's like I feel like as artists, we pretty much use the, you know, tools that are available to us at the time. I mean, I got an iPad as quickly as I could, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that was such a game changer. Like even like I love the portability of art. And I used to carry like a backpack with me that had, you know, like a 11 by 17 board in it. So I got my paper and like draw anywhere. And now the idea that I can just grab this 10-inch iPad and has all of my tools in there. Like most of my digital stuff is actually done on the iPad. And I have a big Cintiq here, but most of it's actually done on that little iPad because it's just portable. I could take it anywhere, pick it up from the desk down to the couch and all of that. Yeah.
So see, for that artist out there who is trying to do something and having to do something like security or whatever, it's like now you can take your iPad and not only can you draw samples, but you could make your own damn comic book and the whole
I have
thing.
friends with full-time jobs who do that. Yeah, they have
Yeah,
full-time
that's
jobs and families, and they make comics, and that's how they do it. They bring their work with them and stuff. Also, digital's great. I'm old now, so my eyes stopped working. So I have like it's hard to just focus on a page sometimes. You know, like I'm doing a new project now that's all analog, but that's because it works that way. If that makes any sense. Like I don't know that I
yeah.
would do World of Krypton, which was all digital. I don't know that I would have done that analog, which has been too hard on my eyes, to be honest.
Yeah,
You know, um, your eyes just pay a price, man. You know,
I
anybody young
know.
listening out here, blue blockers, all that stuff. Take care of your eyes because
I know it.
they don't get stronger. It's not like bodybuilding.
I know the other problems George Perez had with his vision late in his life just broke my heart. You know, I thought like
Yeah,
what a weird irony. Like one of the most detailed artists of our generation and is losing his eyesight. How sad. We've
yeah,
lost so many great artists, and I'm so glad that you know someone like Perez and Kirby has left such an amazing body of work for. I mean, I don't think I'll ever get through Kirby for the rest of my life. You know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah. And they
Uh,
left good examples just as people and creators as well. You know,
Yeah, for sure. Their
um,
legacies are amazing and
yeah,
they're, you know, they're worth their status for sure.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
are you allowed to talk about is this the Monarch project that you are currently working on or
No, Project Monarch actually, Victor Santos and I drew that before and during the pandemic. So
oh, okay.
a lot of what I do is I work just really far ahead of schedule,
Hmm.
as far ahead of schedule as I can because creator owned work and work for hire work it clashes. Like
Right.
I need the work for hire work. A lot of it just pays well in the advance of it, right? Um, so I try and work as far ahead on creator owned stuff. So in case something like World of Krypton pops up on my desk, I can put that stuff aside and But so long story short of Project Monarch, yeah, we had started that quite a while ago. And it's just now going to come out through Dark Horse Comics in September. And it's a satire of conspiracy theories.
So who are you working on this with?
Victor Santos. He's this artist from Spain. We worked on Mice Templar together for years, and he has his book Polar, which was made into a Netflix series. And he's just this amazing artist in Spain. I consider him like my brother from another mother on another continent, you know.
So are you both, you're both drawing it?
Yeah, we take, you know, he probably drew about 60% of the book. I drew about 40% of it. We developed the idea together. So it's definitely just the two of us. And it forced me to learn to letter, which was great. And I colored my own stuff on there. So now this very next project I'll be doing, which I can't really announce yet just because I don't want to confuse people with all the different projects.
Yeah, no worries.
I'll actually be writing, drawing, coloring, and lettering, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because normally you don't color your own work, but Blue Book was like, did that like initiate you wanting to color more of your stuff moving forward?
It did. And I have colored some of my stuff, but usually there's short stories or stuff. Like I did an Attack on Titan story that I colored myself, and a couple of other things. But the discipline with Blue Book and just being a limited color palette, like I realized how much more I could do that's still a limited color palette, but will look full color. And you'll see a lot of that in Project Monarch when it comes out. So now I feel pretty confident that I can handle it time-wise and work-wise.
Is there a singular color involved in Monarch? Are you allowed to say, or is it?
Oh no, that's full color.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I still just tend to use it in a limited way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. I'm like trying to think about like, you know, this is such a great theme. What other color books could you follow this with? The Little Black Book. So, and I know it's a dicey subject, especially on YouTube, but Monarch is about theories.
Yeah.
Conspiracy ones at that. I talk about a rabbit hole. I can't lie. I was like obsessed with them for a while. I went down every rabbit hole you could possibly imagine.
Same here.
Super dangerous, I guess, if you believe that stuff. I can see why they're problematic. And ironically, one of the kings of conspiracy theories cured me of my obsession. I met Joe Rogan.
I've learned the same thing, that like I got cured a lot of my, I wouldn't call it belief in woo, you know, in the woo field. It was just a fascination. It was, you know, we grew up with comics and stuff, so there's all this sort of what ifness, modern day folklore to it. Not that you believe these things, but like a good theory was just enrapturing, right?
Right.
But
yeah.
in just being in that world for so long, I got cured of a lot of it, or I just got a perspective of it, because it did get real and dangerous. And that's what was really difficult about writing, even a satire. When I first started writing it, it goes back to like 2013 or so. And those are the early ideas when conspiracy theories were fun. I'd say they were apolitical because they used to be just kind of like everybody outside of the box thinking. And around 2014, 2015, it started to become very political. Like RT, I noticed like a lot of our fringe people started showing up on RT television, just Russia propaganda television. And we know that there was a lot of sort of influence coming from there. And like that field became very bifurcated very quickly. And suddenly it's sort of like, it's very right-wingy, and there's still, you know, very kind of lefty people in there, but it used to not be that at all. You know, it used to be this outside, what if, you know, pretty wacky stuff. But it was just different. And then Pizzagate happened. And that really started making me to think about what I was joyfully making fun of here without any sense of responsibility. And I had to rewrite it several times, even after it was drawn. It just became really difficult. And then at the end, I realized, oh, satire is fucking dead anymore. Pardon my language.
No problem.
So I had to write a forward to point out like that this is a satire. Like I don't want people believing in lizard people, and I want them to also understand that there are these anti-Semitic tropes that comes with the lizard people stuff and a lot of this other conspiracy stuff, and you should know what you're talking about, even if you're making fun of it. so you can carry some level of responsibility so that when the QAnon stuff happens and school shootings and like so and so is coming after your children and all this stuff, that like so it needs some education levels that it didn't need before.
It's true. So are you so you're saying it's like a satire. So are you it sounds kind of different from the way Blue Book was presented. So how are you, so it's an anthology, like you're both handling different theories or stories?
No, it's one big story. There are some sort of flashback elements to it, which I'm handling, and Victor's doing the main story. And I'm hoping that it's fun and funny despite, the real world anymore. And it basically, like in a nutshell, it's a combination of Stanley Kubrick conspiracies mixed with MK Ultra conspiracy stuff. So it's a combination of that stuff. Hopefully people have fun in it,
I know, speaking of Stanley Kubrick, there's this documentary called Room 237 that tries to, like, oh my God, like one of my favorite things ever. And it's like, yeah, because like people like you and me, though, we take it as entertainment. You know what I mean? Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, the conceit of conspiracy theories is that they're all have somewhat of a truth in them. That's why they work, Yeah. And some have been, revealed to be true over the years, I mean, they've gotten different. But I'm sorry, I'm just like off on a tangent. I did watch this interview with you on Comics Lounge, and one of the things that you said that really like, because it's something I think about a lot these days. One of my new obsessions, and it's not really a conspiracy theory, it's very much possible, is that we're living in a simulation. And you had mentioned a couple of times that the thought of that, like, this is a conscious-based existence. And that makes a lot of sense. Like, I was thinking about some things you were saying earlier, how history just keeps repeating itself. Like, why is that? Like, is it glitching? Yeah. Is it supposed to happen? Why do we never learn and evolve? Like, are we just hamsters on a wheel? Like, what's the point? You know what I mean? So new generations can face, bigotry and prejudice and homophobia. Yeah. Why do we never learn or evolve? Why? I mean, is it going to happen? Is it just part of the human condition? Are we supposed to be vegetarians? I mean, these are questions I have.
Yeah. I mean, people have had wild experiences, and people that I know, trust, and love, about like UFO sightings or ghost sightings or whatever. I've never had a paranormal or a special experience like that, but I know people who there's no reason for them to lie to me about it, but still in that larger sense, it doesn't quite make sense. Like the alien abduction thing, for a long time, the narrative was about needing genetic material for them for whatever reason, right? But we all know now you don't need to kidnap somebody to get their DNA. You just wait till they're not at home, right? And get their hairbrush or whatever. And aliens can certainly do that without making a big show out of it and stuff. So why are people having these experiences? Of course, some people are lying. Of course, some people have, psychotic breaks or night terrors or whatever. But I think there's some things to it that you don't throw single experience out the window. And what is that about? And I think because it seems to evolve with the times and the people involved, that it has to be something to do with our consciousness, that the universe is just a weirder place than we can put our finger on. Nothing special. Like, so it's weird. A lot of times I sound like a fence sitter on this stuff of like, UFOs or paranormal stuff. But, when it comes down to it, I still have a pretty wacky idea that, time isn't linear, and, that we might not be experiencing things the way that we think we're experiencing, that our brains and consciousness are some sort of outside receivers as opposed to being in your head, creating everything or reflecting everything that you see or is actually going on around us, and it, and that's based on nothing. That's based on like what else makes sense. That's all. I don't have any real science to back it up or anything, and it's just a feeling. That's it.
I know. It's like I remember being younger and being like not being able to imagine how old I was going to be in the year 2000. And then I was like, but I will be that age one day. And I was like, you should try to like send a message to yourself or something, or just remember this and try to think about it again when you're into the
Mm.
2000. And so it's so weird how I just sort of planted that seed in my brain so young and I still have it all these years later. But I'm kind of a weirdo. So I don't know,
That's yeah, that's awesome. We should always be doing that, you know.
but it
I
just
often
makes
think
it
about
but
yeah,
it
I
makes
often
it
think about
seem
the
like
good times and
time isn't linear or whatever. I feel instantly connected to that moment. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So it's everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there's something to it for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. You should do ghosts. Speaking of ghosts, you mentioned ghosts. Like, okay, from aliens to conspiracy theories, definitely need to do ghosts because
I used to like to say, I believe in aliens, but I don't believe in ghosts, which just sounds ridiculous. I love that. Like I remember watching what's the funny vampire television show based on the movies?
Buffy. No, that's not
No,
funny.
fuck, I can't remember it. But there's a scene in there where the vampires are talking about how they don't believe in ghosts. You know, like ghosts are ridiculous. You know, uh,
True Blood. No,
no, I'm
no,
it's on FX. I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of it. But anyway, um, I mean,
they don't believe.
I think that all those phenomenons are closely linked together, like the ghost stuff, the paranormal stuff, psychic stuff, UFO alien things. Again, I think the only commonality between all of them are our consciousness and the way that we perceive these events. So whether it's some sort of weird echo of our thoughts that's somehow bouncing out there into the world from our subconsciousness, or it is like the sort of wake left by some other time event or something, I don't know, gravitational waves that are somehow messing with the way that we perceive the world or our brains work. Because stuff like like high magnetism can create hallucinations and stuff, and so there's just I think the world is just so much weirder than we can measure. So and so much of this phenomenon seems to be this weird trickster thing, which again gets into the psychology of the mind. you know um you'll find a lot of those weird commonalities from fairy lore to ghost lore to UFO stuff. They're almost all the same patterns over and over again for as long as history's been recording this stuff throughout different cultures. So it seems like it has more to do with us than some sort of external nuts and bolts thing coming to visit us, or fairies from a different dimension, or our dead parents coming back to show up for a second and disappear. I don't know.
I know it's so weird. I know, and I feel like people, especially if you've never had like a weird experience, like are just so easy to dismiss it just as coincidence, or if you can't explain it, why dwell on it? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
something
And
weird
on the other
happens.
side, there are people who will say there are no coincidences, and then now you're just setting yourself up for circular thinking, and you're just going to find meaning in everything when sometimes things are just a coincidence, whether they're meant to be or not.
Yeah, I know. I think that what you said, so much of what you're saying resonates so much with me, and it does speak to the fact that I guess we must be close in age. But yeah, you do learn to accept and let go, like of so many things. The older you get, and the more experiences you have, it's like you realize that we really don't know very much at all, and sometimes you do have to just take things for what they are and accept life as it happens, and you know, not try to put so much importance or stock in a singular event. Like sometimes,
Yeah,
and I feel like society and just events or whatever, like if you look for signs, it's like the saying, it is what it is. I hate that saying sometimes, but sometimes it's so appropriate. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Sometimes you do have to just be Alex Toth and strip everything down and take it for what it is.
yeah. Yeah, comics could learn a lot from that too. The way that like somebody's enjoying something, so somebody has to mock it, or somebody has an opinion, so this is the way it has to be. And
I know it's funny you should say that, because one of the things I'm most proud of with my YouTube channel is that I could probably be a lot more popular with a lot more hate and like, like sort of like, I don't know, controversy or whatever, but I'm
bombastic
here to
headlines.
I want to celebrate the love and joy of comic books, and Yeah, I've actually really turned people around. Like they like my enthusiasm for the art and certain comic books. People are like, I totally dismissed that comic book, and now I picked it up with new eyes because of you. And on that note,
That's
I feel
awesome.
mission accomplished. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
I mean, comics. I started this channel, at the pandemic because everyone, I had finally had time for it. And it was just so cathartic and so rewarding and so emotional because comics have always been there for me throughout my whole life. So I wanted to give something back. And so I've been lucky
That's
to have,
awesome.
big people like you come and be on my show for no reason whatsoever. So I thank you for that.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's
I'm
been
glad
a
you're doing this and just spreading positivity. It's just easy. It's easier to be positive about things than well, it's a better result to be positive about things than to be negative about stuff.
true. Yes. So before we wrap this up, is there anything you want to share with us about anything you're working on, what might be out now or coming?
The next big thing will be the next arc of Murder Inc. with Brian Bendis and Taki Soma. It's 6 issues from Dark Horse. I think May 10th, the first issue comes out, and we did a 6 issue cover spread, so they're all linked together. So the whole
Wow.
miniseries, that was a really fun endeavor. So that's the next big thing is Murder Inc. And Blue Book #2 is out, so 3 should be out relatively soon, and then Project Monarch out in September.
Very cool. Well, it is nice to see you still rocking and putting out amazing work that so many people love. And you're a great voice in comics and a good, positive person. It's so nice to see. And you deserve all the success and accolades you get, whether you are aware of them or not.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it, man.
You're welcome. It was a joy to talk to you today. Everyone go out and pick up Blue Book, look for Monarch, Murder Inc., and anything else with Michael Avon Oeming on the cover. All
Thanks,
right.
man.
Well, I'll let you go. So it was nice to talk to you, Mike.
Great talking to you, man. Take
All
care.
right. You
All
too.
right, bye.